Listen, I've been a park ranger for 10 years, primarily working in Honey Island Swamp. Now, working back up in there, you see some things and you hear some things. It's a part of the job. In the time period surrounding when I had this encounter, things were, I don't know how to explain it, but things were just kind of going crazy everywhere. We had recently had 2 boating accidents. Imagine the scene. The first boating accident of these duck hunters were riding along in the swamps and they start to notice 40 alligators. 40 alligators all fleeing off land and into the water at the same time. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the kind of boats that duck hunters use down here in Louisiana, but we're not talking about big boats. Sure enough, all 40 of those alligators go into the water. They try to avoid them, but they cannot. Their propeller starts to slice through the gators, they lose control, and crash their boat up on land. Now, according to these guys, these alligators weren't worried about them whatsoever. They went back up on land and went deeper into the swamps. And from that point on, they heard a series of screams and growls unlike anything they had ever heard in their lives. They spent the next 2.5 hours stranded in the same spot, listening to sounds that they say needed to be on a movie. Now, fast forward. About 6 days after that, we discover a boat just anchored in the middle of the swamp. But there's no boater. We run the registration on this boat and track it back to the owner. Find the phone number, call the location, find the phone number, call the house. This old elderly woman answers the phone and tells us that it's her son's boat, but her son has been dead for 5 years. Then the woman goes on to tell us that someone stole the boat 3 weeks ago. And I need you to understand what we're dealing with. We have a stolen boat anchored in the middle of our swamp and no clue what happened to the person who was riding in the boat. That by itself triggered a 2-day search, and we didn't find anything whatsoever. Now fast forward after that, about 2 weeks pass, I go to the gun range just to hang out for a little while, talking to some of my friends, and this group of duck hunters walk up on me, and they have this crazy story that they want to share with me. According to them, they're back up in the swamps duck hunting, and they come around this bend, and there's a man up in a tree. We talk about a human being up in a tree stand. Now, for the record, man, being in the tree stand in Honey Island Swamp is nothing out of place. However, it's the location that this man was in and the things that he was saying that really caught them aback, because they were way back off up in the swamps. This was not a place where you walk into. The location, and then the man points his rifle at them and threatens them, telling him that he's been living back here for 3 years and that this area of the swamp belongs to him. The man even goes on to fire warning shots into the water next to their boat. Now listen, I'm familiar with these guys, but I don't really know these guys. It's not like we sit down and have tea and have breakfast, but I believe what they were saying. So I asked them about GPS coordinates to get to the area. They give them to me, and I decided that I'm going to go out there the next day. And this is where my Dogman encounter happens. And I think I should just be pretty honest with you. I've listened to a lot of these encounters, and I think people are painting an overly attractive picture of how these things look. They paint this highly stylized picture of how these animals look. Oh, it looked like a black timber wolf. People say they look majestic, they look strong. Frankly, what I saw looked absolutely terrifying. It looked like someone took a giant dog, smashed the side of its muzzle, knocked out its teeth, and its tongue was hanging out the side of it. That's what this thing looked like to me, but nonetheless, if you guys see the picture perfect werewolf, okay, but that's not what's down here in Louisiana. Anyway, imagine a scene. To get to the location where they saw this man is a 15-minute ride through the swamps. When I get back into the area, his tree stand is there, still in the tree. So now I'm slowly trolling around looking for a place where this man could physically live. And I need you to understand there are places in this swamp where there are dry ground. And if a person had the skill and he took a hammer and some nails and a chainsaw back into these swamps, you could definitely carve out a place to live. So I'm back in this little bayou trolling along slowly when all of these alligators start coming in my direction in the water. They're not coming from the land. They're in the water swimming in my direction. I need you to understand this bayou is maybe about 30 feet wide. I'm standing at the front of the boat, and for the next 60 yards out, there's nothing but gators swimming in my direction. It was almost as if someone was blowing a whistle and sending them in my direction. And I don't know if you ever found yourself in a situation where there's 3 or 4 alligators in the water. It's terrifying to think that with one wrong step, you can fall into that water and be eaten. But it's a whole nother story when you find yourself in the middle of an alligator parade and you all in the swamps by yourself. So now I'm heading to the back of the boat to get my shotgun and waiting this thing out. As I'm sitting there watching these alligators swim by me, some of them even looking up at me, it still never dawned on me that there was a problem until the birds start flying in my direction. And we ain't talking about 1 or 2 birds. It was a giant flock of birds, all coming in my direction. And that's when it really dawned on me. I might need to be getting my ass up out of here. The alligators are running, the birds are running, and then it starts to go quiet. Let me say this to you. If you're from Louisiana, then you know the myth and the legend of the rougarou, or as some of my other friends call it, the rougarou. Either pronunciation, it doesn't matter. Just so you know, the rougarou is a human being that converts into an upright walking wolf, and they still have their clothes on. They look like a werewolf with human clothes. What I saw moments later was not a rougarou. This was something different. This was something hybrid, crossbred, inbred, crazy looking. Because as I'm saying, in that boat, and the alligator parade is almost over, there's a few scragglers left coming my way when there's this explosion in the water. Now let me paint a picture for you. I don't know if you ever seen those movies where they use dynamite to go fishing. You know, you light the dynamite, throw it in the water, and boom, you get this explosion. Or maybe a movie where they let off a grenade underwater. That's what happened about 45 feet in front of my boat in the bayou. There's this explosion in the water. I mean, water shoots 30 feet up into the air, out in every direction. And I see this thing flying out of the water, holding an alligator. Now, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I need you to understand what I saw. This thing comes flying up out of the water, holding an alligator. And we ain't talking about a little bitty alligator. We talking about holding a 10-foot dinosauric reptile. And truthfully, I think my presence surprised it as much as it jumping out of the water surprised me, because it lands and does not notice my presence at first. That's how come I got such a great look at this thing. And when I tell you there was nothing attractive about this, there was nothing attractive at all. It looked like a giant dog that stood on 2 legs that had Down syndrome. And when I tell you it looked like the side of its snout had been smashed and its tongue was hanging out of the teeth on the side of the mouth, that's what this thing looked like. Listen, it rips the tail off that living alligator and starts to chew on it, and then looks up and sees me. One eye is bigger than the other eye. One of its eyes is bigger than the other, and I distinctly remember that bigger eye rotating and looking directly at me, then the smaller eye moving separately and locking in on me. Imagine a scene. It's still there. Half of the alligator in one hand, the tail of the alligator in the other hand, and it's looking at me and chewing. No fear of my presence whatsoever. Kind of looking like, hey, human, what are you doing here? Now, I'm standing on my boat with the shotgun in hand saying to myself, hell no, this is not happening to me. I'm not dying up in this swamp. However, here's the dilemma that I'm facing. Moving forwards is way faster than moving backwards in any boat that you will ever ride in. However, going forward and not coming back in this direction means that I'm going to be back deeper in the swamps for another hour until I could work my way out of here. Weighing my options in that split second, I decided to go forward and get my ass up out of there. That led to me roaming around the swamps for another 45 minutes trying to find a way out of there before I decided, you know what, I'm going right back through that same bayou, except for I'm not slowing down. I'm going to cut back right, and I'm getting out of here. And so that's what I did. I came speeding through the same spot where I saw this thing. It wasn't there when I went by, but the head of that alligator was laying right there on the bank.